Welcome, everybody. Thank you for the attendance in this hot room today. And welcome to the IB session titled The Future of Information Technology in Shipping. Let me thank, first of all, the organizer, Silk Touch, and also the exhibition See Future. They have set up this dedicated day today to the ports, logistics, and shipping. So thank you to all the organizers, and thanks to our panelists. Two of them are speaking remotely. I hope that everything is okay with our first speaker, Mattia Canevari from Asarmatori. But just to start, let me give you a short framework of this session. The goal of the conference is to open up a discussion about the opportunities and the challenges of digitalization and innovation path in our field, involving experts at the forefront of such topics. We are aware that other industries are far ahead compared to the shipping one, but we are trying together, along with our speakers today, to understand where we are as of now and what the future will bring. What can we expect for the future of IT in maritime? I immediately must raise the need for changing the culture. We always talk about this topic. It's nothing new, but it's still valid. We need to change the mindset, maybe, of the industry to allow for digitalization to become a reality, but also from an IT solution provider, from our perspective. I'm in maritime field since 10 years so far. Let me add that we can rarely see a proactive approach to the application of IT, while typically this approach is reactive. This means consequently that very often all technologies are adopted late, incorrectly, and quite in an incomplete form for many years. Even if we will not be seeing a revolution in a short period of time, things are changing, and they are changing faster than they were years ago. So we are positive, we are working hard to make these things changing. Therefore, our journey today is, during this conference, is about exploring alternative fuels to reduce CO2 emission and accelerate the energy transition while complying with the 2030 IMO targets. New technology applied on board of modern ship with MSC cruise intervention, and how connectivity at sea can enhance digital process. And the last but not least, what are the new trends in terms of training? Let me also remind that today is the World Maritime Day 2021, and the IMO states in its website that seafarers are at the core of the shipping's future. And I think that everybody agrees on this statement. I remind to my speakers that you have 15 minutes for your presentation, you know already, in order to give everybody the chance to make the presentation and to save maybe 10 minutes at the end of the session for the Q&A session. Now I can give the floor to Mattia Canevari, if he is connected.
Yes, could you hear me? Could you hear me?
Yes, I can see him.
Okay.
Hello, class. Good evening. Good evening, Mattia. Good evening, Gurpreet. A very short presentation of Mattia. Mattia Canevari is Energy and Environment Manager at GNV, and he is also member of the board of Asarmatori within the Commission Ship Technology, Maritime Safety and Environment. Asarmatori is a national shipping association representing a fleet of over 450 vessels, is concerned with all technical, legal, environmental, safety and training, employment affairs and trade policy issues that impact on ship and port operations. They work at the heart of policy development and decision-making to ensure that its members are able to benefit from most advanced shipping and technological know-how. Thank you, Mattia, for being here.
Thank you, Caterina.
I can give you the floor right now, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all, ladies and gentlemen. As a member of Sarmatori Commission, I'm honored to be here on behalf of our president, Mr. Messina, who apologized for not being able to attend and greets everyone with the hope that this event could give useful information for the big challenge of energy transition. The scope of this short presentation is indeed to share an insight regarding energy transition and alternative fuels. Today, as you know, environmental matters are the center of the EU community action, but also of the IMO initiative. I want to share my screen. Let me know if you can see.
Yes, very well.
Okay. Okay. So energy transition is like a big wave, I think. We need to prepare for its positive, but at the same time, heavy impact on our businesses, trying to take advantage of the opportunities that it will bring to us. It's truly the only way we have, and the roadmap is tracked by the CO2 emission reductions. Maritime transport is fully committed in this important challenge with the aim to pursue and get the decarbonization target of 2050. It won't be easy. It will require great effort, I think, from all of us, because there's very few time to get the goal. Let's see in the following charts, in the following slides, some more information. Humans started to change natural environment from the beginning of ecosystems. Today, dangerous effects are clearly under our eyes. Ecology and economy cannot go ahead separately, but we have to consider an ecological economy as a fundamental key point for the development of our future society. Global energy consumption grew up of 2% yearly starting from 2000, when we had a total amount of energy consumed of about 400 exajoules. Today, a recent study of strategic management partners stated that the energy consumption is about 584 exajoule. So it means a 46% in about 20 years. In Italy, renewables increased their capacity from 23,000 megawatt in 2008 to 50,000 megawatt in 2019. It does mean 129% of increase, more or less in 11 years. In this picture, hydroelectric represent the 41%, while solar and wind represent 20 and 17 respectively. I said so because zero carbon sources are not an option indeed, but the way to follow for our future. Recent studies stated that the transport is responsible of about 25% of greenhouse gases emissions. Around 10% is addressable to shipping sector. Hence, we can say that globally, GHG emissions for ships are just under the 3%, more or less 2.5%. Lower than the other sectors, but for sure, shipping industry is called upon to give its contribution in GHG's reduction. These next 10 years, I think, will be primary for shipping sector in order to get the final target of 2050. Maritime transport is indeed the backbone of the commercial trades. It covers, and it will cover in the future, an essential role in the European trade and economy. We're talking about the 77% of foreign trade of EU community and the 35% of trade between EU member states. And this trend is called to increase in the next years due to the recovery from COVID-19 situation. In the next decade, it will be essential that new building moves to new generation of zero carbon vessels. But in the meantime, due to the ship's lifespan of about 20-25 years, we think that also fleet refitting takes its part with the aim to improve ships' energy efficiency and profile. I mean improving engines efficiency, using energy recovery system, utilization of scrubbers during navigation will be very important. And we have to arrange ship technical equipment in order to have cold ironing in port. Zero carbon fuels and technology already exist today. But in order to make them truly viable, it needs bigger R&D efforts, industrial scale demonstration projects, and adequate infrastructures. There's no unique solution for all. Deep sea, short sea, and local navigation require obviously different approaches. Energy transition is a path that could be separated in three phases: carbon reduction in the short term, carbon neutral in the mid-term, and zero carbon in the long-term stage. In this context, low carbon fuels and technology able to reduce energy demand today, we think that ICT can be a very important enabler for the carbon reduction, not only with technical measure, but also with operational measure, like route optimization, just-in-time arrival at port, energy performance assessment, and real-time monitoring of our fleets. Moving ahead, we can see alternative fuels like green hydrogen that represent a concrete solution for carbon neutrality, used directly as a fuel or in alternative with fuel cells. Finally, we have to pursue the zero carbon stage, the most important, in which fuels and technology will be based only on renewable sources. Following the previous timeline we've seen for each alternative fuel, let's start with light gas. LNG, as anticipated, present a very good environmental footprint. Compared with fossil fuels, we're talking about zero SOx emission, 25% less emission of CO2 and 85% of NOx, and 95% less emission of particulate matter. Recently, the working group composed by Italian national firefighters and port authorities representatives have completed a technical guide for identifying safety measures for refueling energy at port. We think a great result in order to identify a precise safety framework. Another key points are the infrastructure and its development in order to assure refueling in ports, considering the high volumes needed. In the midterm, we can see a replacement with methane produced by biomasses or by renewable electricity, and in the long term, by hydrogen. Fincantieri initiative with zero-emission ultimate ship, named Zeus, will have two electrical engines accompanied by one module of fuel cells with nominal power of 120 kilowatt and fed by 50 kilograms of hydrogen stored in special cylinders in the form of pressurized gas and a battery system. This means that fuel cells allow this ship, 25 meters of length and 170 tons of gross tonnage, to perform a 7.5 knots and to have an autonomy of 8 hours with no greenhouse gas emissions. I mean, I would say that it would be a floating laboratory in order to acquire useful information. Oh, sorry. Okay. Moving ahead, we find, sorry. Moving ahead, we find biosynthetic fuel, first biodiesel produced from waste, biomasses and waste oils, a process that follows, if you know, the framework or circular economy as requested in the European Directive for Environmental Management. A point of attention will be the production of biomasses as alternative fuel because they require a lot of energy for the different process phases. So, therefore, it's important to compare the emission of CO2 addressable to the production of biomasses and the saving realized effectively using the biomasses as alternative fuel. Second, renewable diesel produced by renewable electricity. And third, in the long term, carbon neutral fuel production. Mentioning heavy gas and alcohol, in the short term, we can find LPG, ethanol, and methanol that in a second time could be replaced with a biomethanol and electromethanol. Finally, in the long term, ammonia produced by renewable sources. Today, for example, Man Energy Solution is working on a two-stroke engine fueled by ammonia. The pilot will be ready in 2024, and it is suggested that the first utilization for tankers that carrying ammonia for fertilizer production. This slide, you can see a recap of what discussed till now. Alternative fuels in the timeline framework, short, mid, and long-term period, starting from carbon reduction, passing to carbon neutrality, ending with the zero carbon context. As said before, there is no unique solution that suits all. Global fleet is composed by a very wide range of vessels, carrying different cargoes and moving passengers with different purposes. Routes, trades, market factors, and technologies applied on board are all variables that we have to take into account, setting a course to the decarbonization of shipping. Talking about short sea companies, this business is characterized by fixed and relatively short routes. This implies a nearly deployment with frequent refueling needs. In our opinion, all this makes short sea vessels ideal candidates for early adoption of new technologies aimed to improve their environmental footprint. But governments should support these companies through financial incentives. Leaving shipowners alone would mean leave a burden that can hardly be managed only with their own strengths. And most of all, we have to think that the benefit we pursue is of public interest. Alternative fuels have a common problem, energy density. We need more spaces to have energy enough for our needs. For this reason, it's not so far envisioning a future where local traffic is managed by full electric or hybrid vessel like for urban transportation. It's not a dream. For this vessel, the problems related to the ship dimension could be positively balanced with relatively small need of refueling or recharging. Another point of attention that could negatively affect the application of innovative technologies and alternative fuels is the regulation framework. In the deep sea transport business in particular, shipowners are very cautious to invest. Even though there's a growing number of new buildings and there are choosing LNG and fuel and prototypes exploring opportunities given by alternative fuels. In this case, we think that it requires a wider approach to adoption of low carbon and zero carbon fuels in order to pursue an overall sustainability of the investment. Well, we know that cruise industry was humongously hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, but it has never lost its attention and its effort for innovation. This aspect is also confirmed by the LNG new building portfolio of the main actors of this segment. Even in this case, dimension make difference. Small ships like expedition cruise vessels could find an opportunity in batteries or hydroelectric, while large vessels could encounter more difficulties due to space's needs to store big amounts of green energy. In the slide number 12, we make a recap of what discussed in the latest previous ones. Regulating framework, company size, traffic and trades, economical resources, so CapEx investment portfolio available for companies, routes and deployment, technical solution are all key points to define a clear way of our energy transition path. Options are available, absolutely, but we have also to be focused on restriction and constraints. What to do now, considering that the clock is ticking? First, implement a ready solution that should be supported by incentives in terms of technologies and infrastructures. An example could be the LNG. Shipowner must be sure and confident for the refueling that it needs. Second, adoption of complementary solution, cold ironing, for example. This type of solution, if electricity is produced by renewable sources, must obviously be encouraged and supported by public institutions. Third, pioneering projects should be supported by government through clear regulatory framework and availability to share financial risk that can be only a burden for the shipowner. Speeding up innovation will be the key of the success for this challenge, the environmental sustainability. Last but not least, we have to keep in mind that today we do not have at our disposal alternative fuels and technology that we might implement and apply on a large industrial scale. This is a focal point, absolutely, to underline, on which deeply reflect. Before alternative fuels described here, like hydrogen or ammonia, become effectively feasible solution, we have to satisfy all requirements needed in terms of safety and reliability. Therefore, R&D activities and ICT competencies must be supported by any means. Private sector and public institutions have to go along together, putting to common service financial resources for investment and its intelligentsia with the aim to obtain a cultural change necessary to reach the 2050 target. I thank you all for the kind attention and wish all you the best for your energy transition.
Thank you, Mattia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having shared with us the program of Assa Armatori, which is quite challenging indeed.
Yes,
and
indeed.
Also for have underlined that research and development is always strategic in our sector. So it's a very, very an hot topic again.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mattia. We can move to Mr. Andrea Crosetti. Andrea Crosetti is MSc Cruise Management, Energy Efficiency Management Officer at MSc Cruise in London. After experience in Navy and defense sector, Andrea joined the cruise industry in 2008, leading the most challenging projects supporting digital transformation and plants telemetry. Ship remote monitoring and energy asset assessment are pillars of his technical knowledge. Before joining MSc Cruise in 2 years ago, Andrea covered management role as solution manager for ABB, consolidating expertise in plant automation, vessel performance management, and marine cybersecurity. So he's going to give us the perspective from MSc Cruise about the implementation of the information technology on board. Thank you, Andrea. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Caterina, for the introduction. Thanks, IB, for the invitation. SeaFuture organization for hosting this interesting workshop. And thanks for everybody for joining this warm day. Coming from London, so for us is quite, it's a hot day. Well, so let's have an insight into our roadmap to the digitalization of IT operation, and in particular, I'm taking care of energy efficiency and plant efficiency on board our fleet. Let's have an insight on our journey. Wow. Okay. The computer is, I suppose. Yes. Okay. There's always an hardware problem sometimes. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. So, aiming targets, we define our strategy towards 2030 and 2050 challenges that we will have in the next future. We are already preparing our fleet and our process and operations to face and to achieve these targets. As Mattia Canevari said before, explained before, the industry is going to change dramatically in the next future. We will have challenges in terms of changing the operations. So, in particular, the first set of targets that we will face by 2030 are focusing in particular of operational efficiency. So, we will try to use less fuel, emitting less, maintaining the same operations and same profitability of our cruise in particular, but also other sector will use the same approach. Of course, we are in digital world. We know very well. We were working with even with AB since again more or less 12 years, different companies and different scenarios, but we are always talking about the same things. Digitalization, data gathering, data collection, telemetry, we are there. So today there's no option if you want to decarbonize properly, you need to have a proper monitoring of your fleet. Today, thanks to the technology that we have prepared in the last years, we are able to have this kind of granularity. And I mentioned here again,
No? Oh, no.
We're cut off. I think.
Yeah, I can't hear anything.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know whether they are aware.
I wrote a message to the organizer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I sent a message and no reply.
No result, no reply.
No.
Gurpreet,
Oh, yes.
Gurpreet?
Yes. Can you hear me?
yes.
Yes, can you please switch off your microphone because it's Andrea Crosetti speaking.
My microphone.
You're going to follow Mr. Andrea Crosetti, Gurpreet. Can you please switch off your microphone, and I'm going to give you the floor after Mr. Crosetti. Okay, now it's okay. Thank you.
Okay, we can come back to the slides. Okay, that's good. Okay, and we are starting again with our partners, and in particular with IB. Artificial intelligence, Voyager, a new set of capabilities in terms of data analysis, using tools like the ones that are offered now by the market. So it's a first step towards artificial intelligence and supporting the ship operations together with advanced IT tools. Obviously, analytic and reportings to report to IMO and the flags. We need proper and precise numbers and proper reporting automatically sent and distributed. And vertical application. What I mean for vertical application, I mean, we are able now to build our energy governance platform. So it's a big database. You can imagine our fleet. We have today 20 ships in operation. We are going to collect almost from every ship 2,000 tags per every five minutes. So 5,000 information measurement status per every 5 seconds. So it's a lot of data. This information can be used not only for monitoring and analysis, also to support the next step. For this is obviously conditional monitoring, predictive maintenance, and in the next future, maintenance driven by data. So it's again for the maritime markets. It's a new step toward digitalization, technology saving, and optimization, and then of course decarbonization. Okay. So just a quick insight on what we are doing right now. So collecting data, starting with the event generation and measurement, analysis of the trends, building them based on numerical information, start up with guidelines, policies, internal procedures, implementation on board, training and coaching. That is very important for our crew to be aware of what they are doing. Operation. And yeah, it's an iterative process. It's a continuous process of improvement of operation. And again, everything is related to efficiency. More or less, this is our internal process, how we set up my department in particular. We are taking care of operational efficiency and new build and R&D energy efficiency, but we are open to receive, of course, input from external sources. We are part of a big group, MSC, but you can vary before. It's my colleague, has the same task I have in Cruise. He's the energy manager on GMV, and we are working together in this group. It's a group of coordination because, again, makes sense to have symbiosis between companies, even if the business is completely different. And yeah, we are part of the CLIA, the Association of Cruise Industry Operators. And together with our competitors, sounds strange, we are building our way forward to decarbonize and to drive our industry to be sustainable in the next 20 years at least. This is my daily job. So you can see we are able now on our ships to perform a great analysis. On the lower right side, you can see this is the electrical load of the galleys. And when we implemented this kind of analysis, the line was flat. They were not switching off the appliances during the night. Thanks to the monitoring, thanks to the new process we implemented now, we are saving greatly. And this is the result. That is very good. Next step, as we said, this is a typical case of an electric motor. When and if do we want to run to failure or to maintain the performance of our motors and engines in the proper way without any kind of disruption? Yes, with data, this is possible. Thanks a lot for being here, and thanks for the invitation. Have a
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you very much. You as MSC are a leader of your sector, so in some way your approach is usually taken as an example. So you do a very great job every day. I appreciated a lot the 2 points about the sharing information, even about among competitors, and the continuous improvement approach. Thank you, Andrea. We can move to Mr. Gurpreet, who is anxious to talk with us. Hello, Gurpreet. Can you hear now? We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
very well. Thank you and welcome to our session. So a couple of words of introduction. My dear friend Gurpreet is a master mariner with 14 years of seagoing experience. He worked at IMO in London for over 26 years. He retired indeed some years ago, but he never stopped. And he retired as Deputy Director, Head Operational Safety Section, Maritime Safety Division. He is still very active, guiding the development of IMO Navigation Strategy Implementation Plan, and active participation in related to marine security and the prevention of piracy and armed robbery against ships. Various papers have been published with his signature on maritime safety and marine pollution issues. Thank you, Gurpreet. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Katharina. Good afternoon, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to say that the views expressed here are today my personal views. Although I work for IMO, they do not represent the views of IMO. That's very important. Secondly, I just want to thank IB for inviting me to give this small lecture. As Katharina mentioned, today is World Maritime Day, and just about an hour and a half back, I was participating in the World Maritime Day seminar organized by the IMO, and the Secretary General spoke. And we had seafarers also giving their views on how they dealt with the COVID pandemic. Just to give you a very brief history, World Maritime Day was first celebrated on 17th March, 1978 to mark the 20th anniversary of the IMO's convention entry into force. And in 1982, IMO's name was changed from IMCO, International Maritime Consultative Organization, to IMO in 1982. Because there's a story behind it. The Secretary General of IMCO went to one country, and the president, he had an audience with the president, and he was asked which consultative company you work for. And he was really surprised because it's a UN specialized agency. That's why the name was changed to IMO. And World Maritime Day is celebrated on the last Thursday of every September. So that's the important thing. Next year it'll be another day, but on the last Thursday of September. Okay, and then coming back to the main topic, the IMO has a role in tackling international climate change. That's recognized. IMO 2030 inter alia includes addressing the shipping industry's carbon footprint and targets for greenhouse gas emissions. And as my previous colleagues mentioned, the work actually started nearly more than a decade back. The first intersessional meeting of IMO's working group on greenhouse gas emissions took place in Oslo, Norway on 23 to 27 June 2008. And it was tasked with developing the technical basis for the reduction mechanisms that may form part of a future IMO regime to control GHG emissions. And then IMO adopted the first set of international mandatory measures to improve ships' energy efficiency. That was in 15th of July, 2011, so 3 years later. And this was actually amendments to the annex of the protocol of 1997 to MARPOL. I won't go into detail because I've given a 3-page regulatory framework to the organizers, and I request if they can share it with the participants, because it will be tedious to mention the various resolutions. We must recognize that this initial strategy is the first milestone set out in the roadmap for developing a comprehensive IMO strategy on reduction of GHG emissions from ships that was approved at MEPC 70. And this is in 2016. The roadmap identifies that a revised strategy is to be adopted in another 2 years' time, that is in 2023. In April 2018, the initial IMO strategy on the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from ships was adopted, which is resolution MEPC 30472 on the 13th of April 2018. This strategy represents the continuation of the work of IMO as the appropriate international body to address greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping. This work includes Assembly Resolution A96323, which sets out the IMO policies and practices related to the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from ships. This resolution was adopted in the year 2003. And now we come to the main issues that have, the main resolutions that have been adopted to address GHG emissions from ship. Like MEPC 62 in July 2011, adopted resolution MEPC 20362 on inclusion of regulations on energy efficiency for ships in MARPOL Annex 6. This talks about EEDI and operational measures for the energy efficiency of ships, which is to date more than 2,700 new ships have been certified to the energy efficiency design requirement. MEPC 65 in 2013 adopted also another resolution to promote technical cooperation and transfer of technology relating to the improvement of energy efficiency of ships. And it requests IMO through its various programs like the ITCP, the GLOMAP project, MTCC network of maritime universities and training centers, to provide technical assistance to member states to enable cooperation in the transfer of energy efficient technologies, in particular to developing countries, because they might need more input than the developed countries. And then previous colleague from MSc talked about data collection system. Yes, MEPC 70 in October 2016 adopted by resolution MEPC 27870. Amendments to MARPOL Annex 6 to introduce the data collection system for fuel oil consumption of ships, containing mandatory requirements for ships to record and report their fuel oil consumptions. This applies to ships of 500 gross tonnage and upwards, representing approximately 85% of the total CO2 emissions from international shipping. And this is data collection system has been formalized, and IMO has also developed the IMO ship fuel consumption database in the GISIS system. So member governments can input the data on the global information system that IMO has developed. Going on to that, the recent work has been at MEPC 75, which took place exactly about 10 months back in November 2020. MEPC 75 approved the fourth IMO greenhouse gas GHG study. And this is an Annex 2 to document MEPC 75/7/15. And the IMO Secretariat was requested to disseminate this information, including any editorial corrections to member governments and the industry. In this year, MEPC 76 in June 2021 adopted a number of resolutions, which included amendments to MARPOL Annex 6. Then, I mean, there are too many amendments to resolutions to mention. And then what is important is that MEPC 76 approved the work plan and requested an intersessional working group of the MEPC to use the work plan as a basis and as a guidance for its further work on the consideration of concrete proposals for midterm and long-term measures for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. In this regard, what is important is operative paragraph 7 of the resolution MEPC.32876, that the work plan was to be applied in accordance with the initial strategy. The recent IMO's Intersessional Working Group on Reduction of Greenhouse Gas Emissions met from 15 to 17 September 2021. It discussed a number of submissions by member governments and international organizations, including proposed life cycle guidelines, and made concrete progress in developing life cycle GHG and carbon intensity guidelines, the LCA guidelines. to be utilized when assessing the overall climate impact of new fuels, which shipping needs to transition in need to meet the greenhouse gas reduction ambitions as set out in IMO's initial GHG strategy. It also discussed about low and zero carbon fuels that would be needed to decarbonize shipping. For different fuel options, it was recognized that there is a need to consider issues such as safety, regulation, pricing, infrastructure availability, life cycle GHG emissions, supply chain constraints, barriers to adoption, and more. This intersessional group, that is group 9, also identified priority areas for further work. The 10th session of this group, which will meet in October, 18 to 22 October, about 3 weeks' time, will also consider inter alia proposal for midterm measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, including a number of submissions related to potential market-based measures. That's important. Some of you might recall there is a document by the EU to IMO about market-based measures for fuel. This is in line with the work plan approved by MEPC 76. And then MEPC 77 will have the benefit of the Intersessional Working Group 9 and Intersessional Working Group 10 in development of further work on the greenhouse gas emissions. And MEPC 77 is in 22 to 26 November this year. And this coincides with COP26 meeting in Glasgow. We also must recognize that in addition to this, all this regulatory work, the Maritime Safety Committee of IMO has also developed draft cold ironing guidelines, as your colleague previously mentioned, that cold ironing by ships in port will help to reduce emissions because there'll be no generators running. The shore power supply will supply power to the ship. So these draft guidelines were, I must mention the draft guidelines were approved by MSC, but they need to be looked at by the HTW subcommittee before they are finalized next year. Another last point I would come to is about maritime autonomous surface ships. You are all aware of the regulatory scoping exercise that's been undertaken by IMO on developing this new technology. And in this context, I would mention the Yara Birkeland, the Norwegian ship that is supposed to be fully electric and autonomous container ship. So there'll be no greenhouse gas emissions. It'll be capacity of 120 TEUs. And we got to recognize that in a decade from now, as mentioned previously, there could be maritime autonomous ships. And we got to take that also into account, what technology would be used for their propulsion. And I think that's about all. And I'm quite available to answer any questions.
Can you go to the last point because we are running a little bit late? Thank you.
To me?
Yes. Can you close shortly, please?
Oh, yeah. I just mentioned that was my last point, the maritime autonomous surface ships issues.
Okay. Okay, very good. Thank you, Gurpreet. Also because the connectivity wasn't that good, but we got the framework at the end. Thank you very much for your intervention. Stay there for the last session of Q&A. Thank you, Gurpreet.
No,
we move to Giampiero Soncini. Giampiero, it's your turn. Giampiero is the CEO of IB Marine, the same company that I work for. He started his maritime career in 1971 by joining the Italian Navy. He was Navy officer for the Italian Navy for 14 years, and then ship manager at the Undersea Research Center NATO for 10 years, and 6 years, and again 11 years with Spectre. everybody knows your background, Giampiero. In 2011, he received an honoris causa degree in public administration by the US Massachusetts Maritime University and was 2 years director of Volaris and a very short period of time in RINA. And since December 2018, he is the CEO of the Marine Division of IB, our company, which is a company specialized in enterprise asset management systems for the technical maintenance and energy management of all kinds of vessels. Thank you, Giampiero. The floor is yours.
So, okay, I apologize for my leg. I contradicted my wife 2 weeks ago, and she beat me very harsh, and therefore I'm limping a little bit. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about the new technology of the future of shipping, which is essentially based on unmanned ships. We're going to see unmanned ships that are already going out, but there are steps to reach the status of ships without any crew at all. IMO has determined the 4 steps of what they called MAS, Marine Autonomous Surface Ships. And each step will be reached in time because while the technology is absolutely here to allow us to have ships without any crew, the rules and regulations are not, and we still need to comply with all of them. So here you can see, I'm not going to go through them, but essentially there are 4 stages. The first one is the one which is available today when you have computers on board and you simply use them to interact. The crew is gathering information, collecting information from them. Then you have the degree 2, where there is a degree of autonomy, there is a degree of support, degree 3, remotely controlled ships with seafarer on board, and the degree 4, which I hope I will see a lot of ships before I end my shipping career, but which is essentially completely automated vessels. In case you don't know, there are already several ships in the world, including some US Navy ships, but also some commercial ships which are basically being run as much more above the experimental status to run completely without crewing. IMO has adopted MAS, so it's not something which is a theory today. Also, classification societies have started to issue rules and regulations related to how to build them, how to manage them, and even ISO has created a new standard called the intelligent ship, which deals with completely automated vessels. I'll leave this one out. So here again, I repeat exactly the same concept. And as you can see on the phase 2, this is where IB is already. So essentially, what we are doing today is we comply with IMO regulations on marine autonomous ship phase 2, which is collecting data from the vessel, converting it into information, which is given to the crew on board and to the staff ashore in order to manage the vessels, not only better from an economic point of view, but better from a rules and regulations and environmental point of view, which is extremely important. Phase 3 and phase 4, we will see them coming up, but it's going to probably take maybe 5 to 10 years before we start seeing many ships. But it's not as far as people can think. Japan, which 5 years ago was a state 0 when it comes to autonomous vessels, is now building the first trans-Pacific container vessel of a decent size, and they plan to have it operational without any crew on board in 2025. Why is this possible? Well, essentially because all ships can be interconnected today. Every single apparatus that you have on board ships is on board of a ship today, on board of a new building, can be completely interconnected. There is one protocol only for the interconnection of the automation on the bridge level. It's called NEMEA 0183, and you can collect every single data coming out from the radar, from the ACTIS, from the GMDSS, from the meteorological situation, and basically bring it into a software where you can carry out several types of analysis. It's a little bit more complicated into the engine and propulsion system because there are 22 different types of protocols. The most used ones are about 4 or 5, but it's not as simple as it is on the bridge to connect and collect data. Moreover, there is a tendency today from the automation companies, the like of Wärtsilä, Kongsberg, and so on, to protect and encrypt data because they want to make money out of it, which is nothing short to act as a criminal organization, by the way. So what exactly can be done with it? Well, it's very simple. It's a completely different way of managing ships. Today, we basically receive data. We receive a lot of paper from the ships, and nobody reads them. You receive new reports, you receive MRVs, you receive all data regarding the fuel consumption, but you don't do anything with it. One of the reasons is that it's simply too much. If you look at any large shipping company ISM office or quality office or DPA, whatever you want to call it, it's basically just like a public library of paper. And nobody reads them, nobody does anything. It's simply to cover, you know, it's what is called a CYA, cover your ass syndrome. If something happens, you have it on paper, you can demonstrate that rules were followed properly. It's called cover your ass syndrome. And what we do instead is we take all data and we convert it into information. The way we convert it into information is our proprietary way. It's algorithm, we collect, we analyze, and we give feedback to the crew. We give feedback to the fleet superintendents ashore in order for them to manage the vessel in a better way. I'll give you an example. Today we can say, okay, the ship has to go from New York to Le Havre, and there's going to be a storm in between. Of course, the captain can calculate a different route, keeping in mind the time charter agreement that he has on fuel consumption, on the estimated time of arrival into a port. Well, the software can give him 100 different opinions or suggestions. The time that it takes for a captain to calculate an alternative route and verify which type of consumption the ship will have, well, the computer can do it in a split second and can do probably 20 different proposals. And this is a very simple one. A much more complicated one is when you have a voyage that goes from Shanghai all the way to Rotterdam with a lot of stopovers. You stop in Singapore, you stop in Dubai, then you stop in Malta Freeport, and then you stop in Barcelona, in Le Havre, and finally you reach Rotterdam. In every port, you have to disembark container, but also embark fuel. And of course, you cannot fill up the ship with fuel when you depart, because otherwise you don't have room for containers. So what happens, people spend hours and days to calculate what is optimal. And most of the time, at the end of the day, you basically don't do it. You just refuel where you need to refuel. And whether or not where you're refueling is very expensive or very cheap, well, it's an act of God. A computer can give you exactly the quantity to embark in each port and calculate where you're going to save money and can give you the exact solution to the traveler's problem. The idea of FORCE, which is a fleet operating remote control center, is simply to allow a complete vision of your fleet looking at the monitors and then concentrating on what matters, on the exceptions on your computer. So the software behind the whole control station will verify if there are differences between one ship and the other. Ships, especially liners today, they always do the same route. But sometimes one ship consumes 3% more, 5% more. Why? The software can tell you and give the alert to me, and I can pinpoint and go down. So it's a complete different approach. It's not difficult, it simply requires a different mindset. We are very reactive today in shipping, so we wait for the crisis to happen and then we react. With the management by exception, you simply avoid the accident, avoid the happening. And if you have an accident, the system will tell you immediately what happened, because we collect data from the radar, from the weather. We collect data from weather at sea level and weather at bridge level, which for cruise ships with 17 decks makes an enormous difference, especially when you have gusts of winds, like it happened in the Suez Canal. And of course, we can pinpoint on all the difference. We can compare the performances of different type of engines, and the ship owner will be able to determine which is the best engine for the fleet in the future. I'll give you another example, a project that we are doing with some very modern LNG, icebreaker LNG ships, which will go into the Northeast Passage. Well, they can break the ice with a bow going for up to 1.5 meters. But when it gets thicker, the ship has to turn 180 degrees and they go with the stern. They go on top of the ice up to 2.7 meters. They break the ice and they continue navigation in reverse, okay? But of course, in doing this, they had to abandon the traditional propulsion because otherwise, you break the propeller in 2 seconds. So what happens, they have azimuth systems. But when they smash into the ice, the level of vibration can be extremely high and therefore destroy even the azimuth system. So what we do, we collect all the vibration data and determine immediately if there is a danger level, not only as a situation at the moment, but as a forecast as the ship continues to move. And this is the type of very, very descriptive analysis of, this is done by Japan, by the way. As you see, even the previous slides were done by Japanese. I repeat, 5 years ago, they were 0. Today, all the Japanese shipping industry is working on automated vessels and intelligent ships. They put together a consortium, you see it here, Japan Ship Machinery and Equipment Association. They teamed up with NKK. They teamed up with all the largest shipyards, and I'm basically bringing everything together. 10 years ahead of European shipyards, by the way. 10 years ahead, unfortunately. Anyway, so here, as you can see, we collect all data. I have another slide that I can show here. You collect all data, and you do that analysis. And as Mr. Crosetti was showing before, it allows also us to move away from planned maintenance systems into condition-based maintenance. So intervening only when the thresholds are above the alert levels, rather than doing a maintenance every 3 months, every 10,000 hours, or every 20,000 hours. To reach these goals, so be compliant, be cost-effective, and be, let's say, environmentally clean. This is a very big thing today. So I'm very happy that as IB, we have been able to be basically leading the pack today. We are ahead of everybody else. A lot of companies are following us, a lot of push into these kind of solutions, but we are very much ahead of everybody else. But of course, it's now it requires the ship owners. It saddens me that, aside MSC, of course, cruise and cargo being ahead of the game and ahead of the packs. But I would like to see much more European ship owners adopting this technology. We are selling in Hong Kong, we are selling in Russia, but we still struggle to sell in Europe, which is a little bit absurd. Okay, one very important thing is why automatic data collection, because of course a lot of companies are proposing this kind of systems with basically logging data by hand by the crew. Well, digitalization cannot happen when you write down on a piece of paper some numbers. First of all, we collect data every 5 seconds. We aggregate them every 5 minutes and send them to be analyzed. Data, you can log it by hand once a day. It makes a whole world of a difference, especially on the statistical analysis. But these are the reasons. Reduce possibility of mistakes. So many mistakes if you are writing anything on paper. No possibility to forget, because the computer does not forget to collect data because it does it automatically. No possibility to manipulate data. I keep saying that the easiest job in the world is to steal money from a ship owner. It's very easy. They never check anything. So, reduce workload on crews. We have 14 people on board and we ask them to record everything by pen and to do new reporting and to do MRV and to do all kind of reporting on carbon monoxide, dioxide, whatever you want. It doesn't make any sense at all. We end up by getting people copying the data of the previous day. And so on. I mean, this is the way the things have to go on now. An example of what would have been possible if the Evergreen ship would have had our system on board, they would have been able to know within half an hour what happened? Insurance company would have been able to tell the Suez Canal, sorry, don't keep my ship at ransom and ask me, 900 millions, and then they settle for 600 millions, because this is the evidence. Because we record everything. We record in the position of the rudder. We record in the position of, the rudder pump. We record the gust of wind, as I said before, not only because when you're talking about ships with 22,000 containers, the windage effect is amazing, is incredible. But there is a difference between the wind that you measure at ground level and the wind that you measure at bridge level, and we record that. Okay, trim, navigation, maneuvering, everything is recorded every 5 seconds. It's essentially a very powerful black box. Okay, and it means that you can manage your fleet literally at your fingertips. This is not new. A lot of companies have been doing this. All telephone companies, they monitor everything from remote. Inmarsat, satellite companies, look at what they have in London. I hope. Giusto, non sapete quella roba lì. Anyway, and so that's basically it. It's from my point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giampiero. It doesn't seem that you went under surgery only 14 days ago, indeed. Thank you very much. If anybody wants to know more about the ship remote monitoring, we also have a stand just in front of the conference room. Next speaker is Marco Camporeale from Inmarsat. Please, Marco, it's your turn. Marco Cristoforo Camporeale leads the Maritime Digital for Inmarsat and is going to take us into the journey of connectivity and telecommunication. He is pushing the boundaries of digitalization at sea, powered by Inmarsat platform connectivity and IoT solutions. In a decade with Rolls-Royce Marine in his previous life, he held key positions, including Vice President's Engineer for Motion Handling Solutions, where he led a team realizing technological solutions for the marine and offshore industry. And as Vice President of Intelligent Asset Management, he led a team realizing digital solutions for condition and performance management for the marine industry, as well as the transformation towards autonomous ships. Thank you, Marco. You can go.
Thank you, Caterina. Since we have been talking a lot about ships, I will start talking, telling a story that starts with cars. So there are a lot of young people here, so you might not have seen this running around, but this is a Ford Fiesta from 1977. This was my first, the first car in the family. Yeah, that is not my family. We were not that good looking. This was the first car I was actually driving. And by today's standard, this car was totally unreliable. I remember, just in the winter, in order to make this car start, there was a air throttle that we had to fiddle a bit in order to get the car started. My father was keeping in the trunk women's stockings, and he taught me how to use the stockings to replace the transmission belt in case it was breaking. It was also very polluting. This car was using leaded fuel. Fast forward 44 years. This is the car that we are driving in Norway. I've been living now 13 years in Norway. Right now, this is, in a couple of weeks, this is gonna look like my garden. This is why also apologies, I cannot wear the jacket here, it's too warm. And this car is, first of all, is safer because I have belts. But also, we are talking about, as we were speaking this morning, we are talking about the different fuel. There are not even thinking about pure electric, but we are talking about unleaded fuel. We're talking about hybrid solutions, Maritime. Also, this car is safer because as the industry has changed, so the infrastructure has changed. Today, we can charge our electrical car or hybrid car almost everywhere. In the Nordics, there is nobody serving you and the gas station. Everything is fully automated. This car is definitely, the cars today are definitely more reliable. And also, even the smallest and the cheapest car today has a certain level of assistance to the driving. If we try to drive today in a second gear, a car at 100 kilometers per hour, there is something screaming on your dashboard, please change your gear. So definitely another level of also consumption. And the last thing, this car is also always connected. Many of our cars today are always connected. Back to shipping. Well, if you look at 44 years ago, well, Inmarsat was not born yet. There was no satellite connection. We were still using a radio frequency. So definitely now the industry is safer. And as we were seeing this morning, we are using different fuel. We are talking about ammonia. We are talking about LNG. Somebody is even talking about electrical solutions. So definitely a bit greener. There are some illuminated ship owners and managers who started actually to install IoT gateways collecting data. We were listening to a lot of good examples so that they actually start to monitor how they consume, how they operate in order to be more efficient. And also the infrastructure is also changing. Couple of weeks ago, one startup actually got the opportunity to convince the Finnish government to use the IS data, basically, to understand the ETA, the estimated time of arrival of all ships to Finnish ports, so they actually can, as all ports in Finland, can automate and have reached this idea of just in time. But compared to other industries like the driving, these are pockets. We are far from having the level of global scale kind of greener and safer. So here is about accelerating the transition to a safer and greener industry. So how to? We are Inmarsat. So definitely, we believe that it's all about having more data and more connectivity. More data, the infrastructure on board the ships in order to get the data off the ship and be able to do that remote monitoring and remote assistance to the crew. More connectivity in order to get data from the ships to the ports, from the ships to the infrastructure, in order to achieve that idea of just in time. So to avoid the rush to wait then to get actually into the port, into the dock. More connectivity also for our crew. The crew today wants to be always connected, and is a tech-savvy crew. And we spend so much into the training of this crew, and there is so little, there are so few of them, retention is actually a challenge. So we need more connectivity on the ship so they can actually be connected with their families. But it's a pain. It is painful to actually work in the area of digitalization. Connectivity is a pain. As I mentioned, most of the owners and ship managers, we buy connectivity for crew welfare so that the crew can actually connect and be online with their families. Which means that if we try to get one of the application we were discussed this morning on board the ship, this application has to fight for bandwidth with the crew. And you can't make both of them happy if you are cheap when you buy connectivity. Almost all the time, to bring an application on board the ship, we need to physically get on board the ship. And forget about doing it now, which is almost impossible. But even before COVID, the logistics associated to coming on board the ship and getting on board the ship, every single ship is an island, has a different system. Every time we need to fight with the OEMs that don't want to share data and connect data. It is a global dispersed market, but we need to remember that it's a complex supply chain. Often we need to install both a hardware solution, a data collector, and a software solution, and the owner buys the hardware, and then the manager, the technical manager, is paying for the software solution, and then the return of investment is to the charterer, who is saving fuel and on their bill. So it's very complex to actually demonstrate that there is any value to any of or all of the key player in the industry. So not even talk about regulation. Every year is something new. Now, IMO 2021 demanding segregation of crew network and the IT network, corporate network, and the OT network is a challenge and a pain to keep up. So what's then the role? What is the role of the infrastructure provider like Inmarsat? Well, obviously, we need to evolve. A continuous evolution of this infrastructure. And I don't mean only, obviously, keep launching satellites so that we have more bandwidth, maybe keep launching different type of satellites, GEO, LEO, seamlessly integrates with other technologies like LTE so that, one gets the bandwidth as they get closer to the shore or closer to certain area. I mean, also onboard the ships, build that IoT infrastructure to enable the ship managers, the ship owners, to get control of their data. Because we don't use only one application on board the ship, and every single time an application provider needs to install a piece of hardware in our engine room, in our control room, we end up having mushrooms of IT gateways everywhere, all clogging the bandwidth, all fighting with the little bandwidth that we have for the crew. We are talking about a hosting capability. Like we have on our mobiles, it is possible, and we are working on it, to deploy remotely application on board the ship on an hosting capability in the rack of the connectivity provider, like if it was a mobile, in order to be able to never get on board the ship. And the last one, we are talking about the capability to provide every single application with a dedicated bandwidth, so that as a ship owner or manager, when we buy an application and we sign a service level agreement, the application provider cannot say, oh, sorry, my application is not working because there was no connectivity. We're talking about dedicated connectivity for every single application so that we can safely deploy and get actually the return of investment. So what is the role of the infrastructure provider, of the SATCOM provider, is actually to develop and deploy the enabling capabilities to be able to digitalize, in order of these terms, but bring application on board the ship and then accelerate the transition to a safer and more sustainable shipping. We are a greener and safer industry than 40 years ago. That's not enough. We need to accelerate if we want to get to half of the emissions by 2050. And our role as an infrastructure provider is to building these capabilities. So we don't have to every single application provider bring them differently on a ship. I will leave you with the word of wisdom of the president of Inmarsat Maritime, and I will make it short. Digitalization, data standardization are coming, and coming quick, more and more quicker than we think. And those who are not going to be on board, well, they will be left behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marco, for this journey since the 70s until today. And we agree about the need of data and connectivity without forgetting to leverage the quality of data and to leverage also the accessibility of connectivity in our sector. Thank you, Marco. And our last speaker, last but not least, Sandra Stephanie, the best. Sandro, after a period on board, he joined ABB Marine, where he has held various positions, including management of the automation team, responsible for the design and automation solutions for cruise and naval vessels worldwide. In 2004, he joined the Consilium Group, headquartered in Stockholm. Now he's breaking the microphone. Are you okay? As general manager of the Italian daughter company Consilium Italy, designing and manufacturing radar systems for navigation and vessel traffic control, integrated navigation systems and safety systems like fire and gas detection systems. Since 2012, he has been lecturer in electrical systems, control and automation systems at the Italian Maritime Academy in Geneva. And now he's going to talk about the training and the importance and how training the crew, the motor crew, has changed nowadays. Thank you, Sandro. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Caterina. Thanks to the organizer for giving us the possibility to introduce the Italian Shipping Academy. It is a public foundation that is supported both by the Ministry of Transport and Education, and we provide educational and training services mainly for junior cadets, deck and engine, that after 3 years training, that is both on board and at school, classroom, they apply for the first certification as a third officer. We are also one of the 3 member of the IAMU, the Maritime University by IMO. And in addition, we also provide training and education in different areas like onboard hotel service and onboard passenger service. Part of the academy is the Enterada, who provide training according to the STCW convention to seafarers. Now recently we have introduced the new training for the IGF code, so for the vessels that are operated by LNG gas. And here you see also the appointment as one of the 3 members of the IMSEA, the International Maritime Safety, Security and Environmental Academy. Let me start with a quote from a famous book writer that you probably all know, Arthur C. Clarke, who wrote 2001, The Space Odyssey, who said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. In fact, we are here now in the what we call the 4.0 area, the area of digitalization. And I think the other speaker have very well introduced the concept of digitalization, meaning anyhow that any new technology introduced, like the Marine 4.0, immediately affect the laws and regulation, but also education and training. So we need to train and educate, especially the young generation, to this, to the use and the knowledge of these technologies. In fact, today, if we look at the new professional figure, we see that we have a combination of hard skills, or the technical skill, whatever you get during some education period about technical items. But also the soft skills, so new skill that mainly belong to our behavior, like the team working, the problem solving, the communication, stress management, and also the situational awareness. And on the top of that, also the sustainability become also an important part of the education, because we need to educate people to the new generation of fuels, use of electrical power, green concept, etc. An investigation made by a research institute has listed the 10 top skills that seafarers rank as priority for their future. And you see that we have a combination not only of technical competence, but also in other areas like, for example, self-management, knowledge of maritime transportation, etc., administration, etc. The new technology has, of course, introduced also new functionalities, new systems that before were not available, if not at a very, very low level. But we can see that for any of this new technology, we had an effect immediately on some technology, from the energy saving to the asset management, to the connectivity, to the document workflow, to the decision support. And the new officer or the next generation officer has to be prepared to this type of technologies. This is just to give you an example, the amount of data that are managed by an automation system on board one of these kind of vessels. Every day, a vessel like this transmits an amount of data that is equivalent to 65 years of our surfing over the internet. So the amount of data is really tremendous. Of course, technology is always a balance between technology itself, process, and of course, people. And if we look at the new technology, we see there's so many applications that today we have that has completely changed the scenario, especially the operational scenario. Take, for example, the not assisted automatic docking, thanks to the availability of new data like this laser-based radar or the 5G connectivity, the night vision camera, and also other parts like the remote data monitoring has been well explained before, and also a functional integration. So we don't integrate system, we integrate function. One example is, for example, the situational awareness. Situational awareness is an integration of different areas, from the data to the decision support, to the work environment, and also to teamwork and training of the engineers. We have used several application cases to demonstrate which are the capabilities offered by this new technology. For example, the intelligent awareness that provide a real-time figure of the surrounding situation, especially during operation in area where the visibility is low or during nighttime, or the remote monitoring and condition-based maintenance, which is now becoming more and more frequent on board the ships, that provide support for maintenance management. So our project is to, let's say, create, if we can say so, a new generation, a next generation of what we have called Officer 4.0, where we combine the knowledge of hard and soft skill. In other words, our goal is to go from knowledge-based to competence-based training, which we believe is much more effective. Hard skills, okay, we know we have already discussed that. We have information technology, electronic engineering, cybersecurity, fuels, risk analysis, safety and security. Soft skill, this is quite new because here is to create a different mentality by the operator, for example, being able to interact with a remote team, as we have seen before. When we have a vessel that is operated from a remote center, the people on board, even if they are few, they have to be able to interact, to communicate, and the communication has to be effective, especially imagine if you are in a potential dangerous situation. Understanding evolution of the situation, managing stress, teamwork, leadership. So problem solving. I'm sorry that I have no time to go too much into detail, but this is, for example, the model that we have selected for supporting the problem solving. It is based on this Giorgio Nardone, who has been a researcher that has spent quite a lot of time in Palo Alto in California at the Mental Research Institute, and he has introduced some special technique, like, for example, the mountain climber, that is based on the fact that instead of starting from the bottom to the top, you do the opposite, and you check step by step all the different cases, I mean, before for solving an issue or a problem. Cybersecurity, of course, is another important. And we see cybersecurity not only as a set of procedures, but also as a state of mind. So people have to understand that cybersecurity is not simply, okay, I follow that procedure. It's something that they have to have clear in mind every day of their job, because every time that you connect something on a network, there is always a risk of some unforeseen or undesired event. Risk management is also another important issue. So ability to identify, analyze, and evaluate. This system, of course, introduce a different risk. I mean, today we have a very, very close connection between the automation and the machinery or the equipment. So the borderline between automation and equipment becomes very, very weak. And we have to understand that any failure in the system in turn can create problems to the equipment, and we have to be able to understand the source and how to remedy to the potential failure. So, and in fact, what we say that when increasing the level automation, you also create a distance from the operator to the process up to a level where the operator is unable to operate a system manually as time ago. So in our program, we have included the risk analysis, evaluation of and interpretation of data, how to override the control and operate in manual mode, and also, of course, we have support from the industry specialists. The training program, of course, is based on different activities, starting, of course, from the front-end lessons in the classroom, simulation, industry seminar, cooperation with industry is fundamental, onboard familiarization, and also visit to factories. We need, of course, to assess, and we have created a model to assess the competence of the trainees based on a pre-assessment, so before the training, then the assessment of what they have acquired during the training, and also a post-assessment made after they have been on board and have, made some familiarization with the system. I wish to conclude saying that, of course, technology is culture, and is the only method, a good method to spread a new technology. We have to start to think that the ship is a system, not an individual set of equipment in a way or another connected to each other. Of course, we need to improve the process knowledge by the operator. Otherwise, it's difficult that they understand how to operate a system in case they have a failure of the control. We have to train also the trainer, because we need also to create a new generation of trainer. And also it is important that we create a much closer cooperation between the industry and the educational institute, including the university. Professional roles are emerging new, like the IT officer, which will become more and more important, or the electrical officer, which many owners have already introduced in their crew. I mean, and of course, last, designing a new ship, of course, has to be based on human factor principle. It's not simply to design according to some technical rule or whatever. I mean, the human factor are important. I conclude with another quote. This time is from Rudyard Kipling, who said, in the last century, the new ship here is fitted according to the reported increase of knowledge among the mankind. Namely, she's cumbered end to end with bells and trumpets and clock and wires. It has been told to me, can call voices out of the air, of the waters, to con the ship while her crew sleep. But sleep you slide. It has not yet been told to me that the sea has chosen to be the sea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandro, for the very good presentation. You touched a lot of interesting points, from the hard skills to the soft skills and the sustainability. So we had the chance to learn how training the crew has been changed so far. So we are approaching the end of this discussion, unless we have some questions, comments, thoughts that you would like to share in this boiling afternoon. Otherwise, yes, please.
You have to keep, okay. Hi, my name is Gregory Jovanov. I'm the Managing Director of Strategies Maritime ICT Cluster in Piraeus, Greece. So I have a question about regarding this. First of all, congratulations for the whole session. Very high quality of presentations from all the presenters. Regarding these platforms, the ICT platforms that will be running on the autonomous ships and the always connected ship and all these marvelous things that we heard about, who is driving the standards for them? I believe they need to be standardized, otherwise there will be cacophony of all sort of. Who is that the ICT industry? Is the IMO? Who is driving the standards, and is there any authority now, some framework under which these standards are developed?
Okay, Giampiero, you can take this.
Okay. So, as I said before, ISO has started a standardization process with, I can't remember the number of the ISO, but it's called the intelligent ship. Of course, we are at the very, very beginning. They're cooperating with the Japanese authorities, the ones I mentioned before. And actually, the involvement of ISO has been started by the Japanese association that I showed before. It's a long way. It's a very long way. Everybody's against standards. And there is no digitalization without standardization. It simply is impossible. But believe me, there are, of course, a lot of industries or a lot of companies that they don't want. They want their own proprietary systems because this way they can extract more money. And but it will have to go there. By the way, this conundrum has been sorted out by the aeronautical industry more than 50 years ago. So we are 50 years behind the aeronautical industry. But I hope it's going to come. I know it's going to come. But again, Europe is very much behind.
To adopting these kinds of platforms and standards.
Yeah, of course.
They are not ready.
But
Marco, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to your point that, ISO is there, but before we get IMO behind it, it's going to be very interesting you're going to pass another 40 years. So, but what has happened also often is that I believe is going to happen in the maritime, you're going to have a de facto standard. So as today in our mobile, you have 2 or 3, mobile systems, and nobody has decided those have been the 3. It's just distribution. There will be 2 or 3 de facto standard, 2 or 3 platforms. As with those mobiles, they will be slightly different, and might want decide to have one or the other just for the design of it or for the sake of it. I don't believe there is going to be one platform everywhere, but there might be 2 or 3 de facto standard, and then the IMO will follow up 40 years afterwards.
Gurpreet, do you want to add something? You have a comment, please.
Yeah, basically, if you look at the IMO's navigation strategy, it's S100 data transfer model. And at some stage or the other, I understand IEC, ISO, they develop the corresponding standards, but it's the IMO who will be leading the change or the development of the standards. The regulatory scoping exercise is just the start. They have identified which things to look at. And I think it'll have to come from IMO and then the corresponding standards for data transfer, IHO, ISO, IEC. That's the way I see it going. Thank you.
Thank you, Gurpreet. Standards, existing standards are there for a long time. We don't need new standards, to my opinion, but we need a standardization process, which is something different. Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, we can close, I think. I thank you very much, the attendees and my speakers. And I wish you a very pleasant afternoon and evening. Goodbye.